Sup, creeps, and welcome to Creepy Confidential. Is Mothman really a supernatural force predicting impending doom? Did Apollo 11 really land on the moon in 1969? Did you find out if that was a cult that was living just 2 doors down that you waved to every single day when you got your mail? If these are the things you ponder when you should be sleeping, then I would like to welcome you to Creepy Confidential. I'm your host, Noelle, your resident weirdo Wisconsinite. I open case files on my favorite cryptids, cults, conspiracies, and other worldly creepy, with new cases, live broadcasts, and local lore. Some stories have been lost with time. Others are perhaps still happening today in your local communities, right up under your very creepy noses. So get ready, creeps. It's Creepy Confidential. What's up, creeps, and welcome to Creepy Confidential After Dark. You may notice things look a little different. We're trying to do a couple little changes around here just to make it look a little bit cooler. Before we get our guest on for tonight, I just want to start by saying thank you for a great 2024 season. It wrapped and it was so much fun. I'm glad for everybody that joined us on trivia night, costumes, everybody learned something based on a true story. Very, very, so much fun. And I hope that our season for this year is just as much fun. We have a lot in store. We're going to be doing more live streams, more cool stories. We're going to be bringing you all kinds of new content. So let's get our next guest on the show. So tonight's guests both share a lifelong interest in UFOs and have had several bizarre experiences. A lot of bizarre experiences in their lives, and they decided to write their book, Who They Are and What They're Up To. And you know, I have a copy, and yes, I have read it and finished it, bookmarks back in the top. So as we get going, we're going to be discussing the show, and I want you to welcome to our show, of course, Leslie and Stephen Shaw.
Hi.
Hello, guys.
Good evening.
All right.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Welcome to the show. So we'll be keeping an eye in the comments. Looks like we already have a few people before we get rolling. We have Trevor. Hi, Trevor. And we have Jess saying hello. So we'll be getting some more guests as we roll in here. So it was great chit-chatting with you backstage. And I really enjoyed this book. And something that you mentioned was that I really enjoyed the theory. You picked up on the questions we have I've penned. Is that I love that part of it. And there is so much to cover and so much to talk about. So what do but before we start about the book, what do you guys do when you're not penning really fun, interesting alien content?
Well, I'm a semi-retired journalist. I still work for the newspaper doing page layout and a little bit of writing. And Stephen is a retired acupuncturist and
Chinese medical doctor, yes.
and
Cool.
Tai Chi master, and
Yep, taught that for many, many years.
Mhm.
Multiple different arts I did actually. And right now I enjoy playing horseshoes, believe it or not.
and he's a brilliant musician. He's a brilliant musician.
And writing music,
Yeah.
of course, yes.
Yeah, so
That's fun. I love that. You got to have something that's kind of outside of your, your specialty. What makes you tick? So before, again, we dive into the theories, can you tell us, let's talk about those encounters I mentioned. If you had to remember, what was the first encounter for each of you of an otherworldly being?
Okay.
why don't you start,
I'll
since
start
yours
with
was
that,
first?
I know you've had a lot, but try and
my
remember your first one.
My first one was 3 years of age.
Yeah.
Wow,
Okay, and
super young.
yeah, it was. But at that point in my life, I was sleeping, of course, on a bed, and I was told about this family spirit guide that would visit people that was called O'Glegley, and I would be visited in the middle of the night by this two-legged being that I couldn't see, but it was jumping on my chest and my stomach playfully, just like kind of say like, how's the baby kind of thing, but it was it was invisible, and it wasn't my mom, or it wasn't the cat or the dog. So it was two-legged, and I remember it happened multiple times. So anyway, so that was my first experience. Now Leslie's was
Yeah.
She's had
much different later. Yeah. Well, I've had psychic experiences and astral experiences prior to seeing my first UFO, but my first UFO was just life-changing. Stephen had so many different experiences over the years, and I believed him like 98%. Right, there was still this tiny little kernel of
much of speculation.
Right.
A tiny one,
It's human
but then
nature.
finally I saw my first UFO, and
we were together.
We were together. So it was his fourth UFO, my first. I was driving home at night, and he was in the passenger side, and
right.
It was. I looked up through the windshield, and there was a bright white light in the sky. I'd say about double the brightness of Venus. And it was moving slowly, and I thought, well, maybe it's a plane coming into Palm Springs Airport or something.
Yeah, we were on the 62 going west
in Joshua Tree,
towards Yucca Valley.
And then, but it didn't behave like a plane, and it was moving too slowly, and then it would stop and just hover, and then it didn't have those little blinky lights on the side of the white light like planes usually have. Right?
Sure.
Running light. And it was just a solid round white light. And as we stared at it, it moved to above the highway in front of us and just stopped. And it started getting brighter and brighter. So I don't know if it was moving towards us and us towards it, or just us towards it, but it got brighter and brighter until it was about half the brightness of the moon. And then it shot away to the north at supersonic speed, instantaneously supersonic speed, probably when I guess 20,000 miles an hour.
Right.
And it was
breaking
gone
the sound barrier like fast.
In a quarter of a second,
Right. We both saw it, and we both were, I had probably maybe even a better view because she was driving, and I can definitely confirm that. And I said, oh yeah, it went over towards this is 2005. In January of about 2005.
Yeah.
And our most recent one was 20
much later. Yeah.
Wow. Just
that's
still
wild.
in the desert. And we also both saw that. And to me, it was like you're saying, hello, Steve, we know where you are.
And, if you will. Like a little check-in, like just a reminder.
Yeah, it was actually pretty impressive, that last one we saw.
But the first one is life-changing. That's when I believed him, slammed into 100% believed him.
Right.
no doubt anymore, right?
Completely gone.
Yeah, and a white light in the sky can be any number of things, right? But when it takes off at 20,000 miles an hour, it can't be anything but.
Then you can't question it, and I can say that I've only had one. I'll say I haven't seen an alien, but I've seen a UFO. I think I'm confident that it was a UFO, and I was little. I was probably kindergarten, first grade, 5, 6, however old that is. And it was in Paris, Texas that we were talking about. And there's a water tower there in Paris, Texas. And you look up, and Mom was taking me somewhere, and you saw the little, like the the side view of the ship, like bigger into smaller. And we both looked up, and I remember her looking at me, and I looked at her, and because I could see it, and all of a sudden it went just like that,
Yep.
exactly how you described, And at the time, I was like, "Well, what? I'm just a kid," but I remember seeing it absolutely, and being in the middle. I'm a veteran myself. I was like, we have some pretty cool toys in the military, okay, but
Yeah,
to my knowledge, we don't have any cool toys that do that.
that can do that. No,
So,
siree. It's an order. David Fravor, one of the pilots that was the first one to see the Tic Tac during the the Nimitz incident in 2004, and he said that it's an order of magnitude ahead of our technology, and I agree with him.
They're flying
It's
the
not
F-18s,
Russia or China or somebody.
right, this is a total, it's a different thing altogether.
And even though we know for a fact they've been clocked at 72,000 miles an hour, that's that's the fastest I've ever heard them being clocked.
by
But
the Weather Service.
yeah, a National Weather Service.
I didn't know we had anything that could read something that fast. So that's pretty wild.
Yeah. But they never make a sonic boom.
Right, because they're
So
too fast.
they're not moving through our airspace the same way we move
Right.
through our airspace, where we build air pressure ahead of a vehicle, and
it's that like an aircraft, like a fighter jet, it has to reach the sound barrier and then break it. Where they're already booking, baby. They're not breaking it, they're well past it.
yeah, well past it.
They
Indeed.
don't make bank turns and things like they're trans-medium, don't make bank turns. So, a lot of people are saying, that are just, getting into this and just seeing, sorry, a lot of stuff gets faked too on the internet.
Oh, and you can, and they can fake it. It's crazy. But
it's so sad because now everyone has a video camera in their pocket now. And so you think this would be the era of disclosure, but now CGI has gotten so good to the point where we can't trust anything we see now.
Yes. Or the people that do film it, it's like they found the one camera from 1995 and it's filmed on a potato.
Yeah,
like,
some terrible.
You pick up this and it's 1080, crazy whatever. I'm like, really? What did you dig around in your vintage collection to record this flying thing?
Yeah, it's not doing anybody any favors doing that kind of stuff. I mean, it's like even faking Bigfoot. I mean, it's like, come on.
Yeah, they do the same thing. I'm like,
it's messing with people like us who are trying to do legitimate research, and it makes it difficult.
Even the stuff about actually 10% of the American population, at least of the data last year, 10% still believes that the moon landing was faked, and 12% believe that the Earth is flat. That's like 35-40 million people.
It makes my brain hurt so much when I hear that.
This like, oh my God.
I watched an interview where somebody was interviewing Buzz Aldrin, and he came out. He's been coming out and telling people about how this UFO followed them all the way to the moon, right?
Yeah.
And he says, we saw it, but what could we do? We couldn't stop
record
it over there or something and check them out. But when he hears this stuff about the fake moon landing or something like that, he just gets so incensed. He says, "Are you kidding? We almost killed ourselves doing it."
Yes. Yeah. I enjoy these, like the people that have the knowledge of space travel and all the math it takes and all this. And I was listening to Neil deGrasse Tyson. I always say his name wrong. And he was like, if we did all this work to fake it and all these equations to fake it, we could just do it. And it makes sense. Right. If all the maths, then why didn't we just do it? So that was pretty wild.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that that want to swallow the blue pill, and there are a few that want to still swallow the red pill. It really depends. Do you want reality or do you want fiction?
Yeah, they do. They want fiction, and I think it's sadly, because blame it on the educational system. I think sadly people are dumber nowadays, and or they live in the land of it's just they want to live in the land of make believe because it scares them.
Yeah,
that was a good Chuck Mangione song from the 1980s, actually.
And we realize that our theories can come as a shock to people, but they really are rather logical. we try not to go down a lot of rabbit holes.
No, we do not.
In our theories, don't require, because our theories are that they're local. The aliens are actually a breakaway branch of humanity,
Our cousins.
still living here inside the planet,
which is very interesting
around
theory.
our solar system. Yeah.
Mhm.
So because we believe that, in our theories, you don't need faster than light travel.
Yeah.
You don't need theoretical physics. You don't need time travel. You don't need interdimensional travel.
Wormholes
It makes the understanding part easier for those who, science
Right.
boggles their mind or math boggles their mind.
It's like Occam's razor. What would be most likely? Okay.
Yeah.
It's most likely that they're coming here 10 to 100,000 times a year from multiple different races from different parts of the galaxy, and just happen to be wanting to interbreed with us successfully and take our cow blood and be doing this for multiple thousands of years and be interacting with my family for at least 4 generations.
Right.
I mean, come on.
It's such a pervasive phenomenon. It's seen all around the world pretty often. And yet it's also a very old phenomenon. It seems to go back thousands of years.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sure.
And
It's in stone tablets. I mean, it's crazy. Or just, stone carvings about aliens.
Right.
You see the whole face. There's no way. You can't put the one face next to the face you see on the cover of the book Communion and go, well, there's no way it existed. It's right here.
Right. Right there on the wall of the tomb,
right, or whatever. Yeah, it's enter example here. It's quite crazy. Now the history now that we're talking about theories and in your book here, I want to talk about the kind of the history of the UFO activity chapter. I love it. So this is not necessarily on the subject, but we're mentioning other things. Now that chapter, you talk about the Project Blue Book operatives and kind of the lengths that they went to basically the squeaky wheel needs to get greased. So, and Project Blue Book started happening quite some time ago. And do you think though that in the case of those things, do you think those behaviors are still happening to either dumb it down, make people think that they're seeing things, make people think that they're stupid, or can you think of an example where you think that's still happening?
Oh, most definitely. There's a very powerful faction in our government, we think in the Pentagon, that is still trying to keep this phenomenon under wraps, still lying about it, still punishing whistleblowers, still fighting against disclosure. We still see it going on today for sure.
Yeah, let's say that it's not that we think, it's like or believe. It's more like what we have come to understand, especially from Luis Elizondo's book Imminent. He says specifically that he got stonewalled so many times in the Pentagon trying to bring things forward, and he says he knows that they're embedded, that there are elements within the Pentagon that they still want to spread disinformation for their own long-term purposes. I mean, it is there. That element still exists.
And they currently control the Arrow. The new version of ATIP, right, is Arrow.
They just rebrand.
They just rename this stuff, but it's the same thing. In the Project Blue Book, they had a manual that they had for dealing with extraterrestrial crashes. It got leaked to a whistleblower, a UFO researcher a long time ago, but it goes over the exact procedure about how to get the public to not believe it really happened. First they come in and they send in these people, these men in black would come to a, let's say small town America has a mass sighting. Mm-hmm. And they would interview everybody and get all of the pertinent data for themselves. And then they would start this ridicule campaign.
Twist it.
To embarrass everybody into silence. Mm-hmm. And if embarrassment didn't work, then they would use threats. They would threaten to kill your family. And if the threats didn't work, then consequences would follow. They would somehow get you fired from your job or some other punishment for you. And then we think in the rare cases when they just couldn't shut people up that were too vocal, they'd kill them.
Yeah. And I have I have a weird obsession with Project Blue Book. I want to find and read old documents, and I don't know why, but I do. And there was a television series recently called Project Blue Book, and I was watching because I wanted to watch the oh my gosh, the Braxy episode, basically. So in West Virginia. And that's exactly what happened. They basically, it's an owl. They go through the whole city. They tell everybody, you're nuts. There's no way it could be this. And it cut to another scene where somebody's in a mental hospital, a person who served in the military, and they make him think he's crazy, and they like push him out the window. Because he's like, I know what I saw, because they were talking about other instances where
General Forstall, I think it was.
Well, Forstall wasn't a general, but he was part of Majestic 12. He was the Secretary of State under Truman.
Secretary of State.
Yeah.
So he wanted to.
Wild.
He was in the 40s, and he wanted to come forward and disclose everything to people.
Yeah, Pat Price.
And he ended up having a fatal accident.
Pat Price.
Oopsies.
Phil Schneiderman,
Yeah, you have both.
Or Schneider, just Schneider.
Okay, so you get too close, and with the Men in Black weren't really reported until about the 1940s, right after 1947.
Roswell is one episode.
There were some instances that in Bramley's book, The Gods of Eden, where these black entities would show up and spray fields with this green gas, and then everybody would end up with pneumonic plague. So that was happening, a long time ago. But what I see is that these Men in Black, they show up like even on Navy vessels, and they'll take all the information they'll show up and they basically have more power even over the captain of the ship. What I'm seeing is that they do have ability of telepathy and mental manipulation, because they are able to pretty much get their way, and they just show up. They show up out of nowhere, and they're able to get all this information, and
showing no insignia and no identification.
And then they just basically go.
Right, which is the first sign that they're not who they look like they are.
Coming from,
the NSA.
We do know that every time they're tall Caucasians. You know? Right. That's part of our theory that we found too. That's very important. We'll get to.
So the first chapter in the book, I had to assume that people would pick up the book that knew nothing about this phenomenon, right? So that's what chapter 1 is. It's like this crash course, almost bullet point.
I loved it. Being the history person, I was like, it was like, hold on, we're going to give you A through Z, but we're going to do it in this many pages.
And this happened, and that. So it's only a small chapter, but it covers the UFO phenomenon in the U.S. over 80 years, quickly.
Yeah.
I like to focus on mass sightings, especially because mass sightings are, when a single person sees something, they could be mistaken or, lying or crazy. But if 300 people call the cops and say there's a UFO in my backyard, then then we know.
I think two people can keep the story straight if you really try. 300 people or 50 people, even 10 people, the chances of all of them keeping the same story is almost zero.
Right.
Sure, it's possible, but it's not plausible.
We both played a telephone game, with 20 people in a line saying, here's even 7 words to remember in a row. By the time it gets to the 20th person, it's changed by at least 3. If not, the whole story has changed.
Yeah.
But, if you have somebody actually witnessing something that is exciting or scary, the chances are they're going to remember it the same way.
Yeah. Quick comment, because it's not to make myself feel boastful or anything, but I'm not sure if everybody in the audience sees I wore my little green men today. And Jess says that she loves the earrings. So I
just wondered where the green men thing came from, because I know they're gray and they've been reported as blue and white, but it
was more like Marvin the Martian,
Right. I think it comes from the little green men thing from
War of the Worlds too. The first,
maybe
they were green. The green spaceships, right?
Yeah, I have, and I think every alien thing I have is green. None of them are gray. I mean, I like green. It's creepy confidential color, so I got to.
It can have an effect on the nervous system and seem a little sickly. And it's kind of funny. You light green in a certain way, it can make people feel this a little queasy sometimes.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
Stephen's family, they saw, they were preyed upon by the tall grays.
Mhm.
His brother Philip saw a tall gray in his room one time, and that was when we realized what we were dealing with. Before that, and at first it's like, is it a haunting? What exactly is going on?
Is it some sort of other entity? Like, what? Yeah. I
This,
wondered that too.
yeah,
About
in our documentary on YouTube, who they are, we only get to part of my story, and I felt kind of a little gypped in a way,
Yeah.
because I have something that happened to me, that when my dad and my sister were living together in one house, and my mom and my brother were living in the house that we were building up in the woods of Sonora, California, which is 350 miles away, that these things were happening at the same time in January of 1979. And it really quickly, the first night, my dad, who was a cabinet maker, and I was the apprentice, we were working together. He came to breakfast and said, Stephen, my door's open, my closet door's open and closed on me last night. And I just took it,
And
okay,
they blew
fine.
it off and went to
Blew it
work.
off,
Yeah.
sure.
So-
You're like, whatever.
So the next night, I'd been studying Tai Chi, and I was reading Paramahansa Yogananda's work, and I gave my dad this little booklet to read, and I thought he might enjoy this, right? So 9 o'clock at night, I gave him this booklet, and then 9:30, he came into my room with this puzzled look on his face. He said, "Stephen, I'm hearing bells." I said, "Okay, I've been a musician my life, so I'm hearing silver bells." Well, I know what a silver bell sounds like, ding, ding, ding. Okay. And sure enough, there's this bell being rung inside the wall by the chimney. I got my sister. My sister was 13 at the time, and she came into the room and she said, "Where's that bell coming from?" So we're all hearing this bell going off. It went on for a good 10 minutes. So we looked up the flue, banged on the wall, whatnot, and then it stopped. And we went to bed, confused as anybody would be at that point, right?
Right.
So because
Good for you for being able to sleep, by the way, sidebar.
Well, I grew up in a family where this stuff was not uncommon.
Yes, so many weird things. They kind of just started shrugging,
Another one.
I grew up knowing that we had a family family spirit guy called O'Glegley, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so we called my mom and my brother the next morning, as we would do every day, because they were living in the house that we were actually physically building. And my mom said to my dad, "Jeffrey, the strangest thing happened last night. It's about 9 o'clock at night, and I heard this bell ringing, and I thought it was the phone." And so she picked up the phone, and she started having this conversation with this male voice. She said it was a baritone voice saying, "I am the invisible Ambichi," or something like that.
Very
right?
Indrid cold of them. Like,
Right.
We don't know what
We
that
have
means.
no idea what that was about. So I got my brother on the phone. I said, Philip was 12 at the time. I was 18. I said, "Philip, did the phone ring last night?" He said, "No, I didn't hear the phone ring, but we're in the same room, and Mom did pick up the phone, and she was trying to have a conversation with somebody." And this was at the exact time that the bell was going off in our house. Okay. So the very next night, I was sleeping in my bedroom on the lower bed, and I was awakened by a whizzing sound. And I thought, well, maybe a fan or a bug. Kind of turned over and looked down the hallway. There's a little bit of light there, so I couldn't see anything, so I decided to go back to sleep. And then, laying on my left-hand side, and then the bed gets pushed twice, gently, push.
From the base.
From the base.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, growing up in Los Angeles area, it's an earthquake, been through them before.
Okay, that makes sense. I would buy that.
I'm trying to be logical, right? And then push a
Again,
little stronger. And at this point, I'm starting to get worried. And then
jump out the bed, like ready to fight.
Okay, it's like, wake up.
Yeah.
And at this point, I'm starting to think, is somebody playing a joke on me, a trick? And then I get tap, tap, tap on my right mid-deltoid.
A bony index
like
finger.
An index finger going tap, 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 3 times. wake up. And at this point, I'm scared and irritated at the same time, which is
Like, leave me alone.
rolled over and I said, "What?" And I'm looking at this shape in front of me, and it's shimmery, and I look at it, and then I just black out. I told my dad and my sister about it and went back to work. Okay, so the next night I decide I'm not going to sleep in that room.
I don't blame you.
I wore my work clothes from the day before because I'm a guy, and decided to sleep. I decided to sleep on the couch in the living room, and my piano's to my right hand side. So, anyways, I woke up about 5:30 in the morning. It's dark, okay, but there's a little light on, so I can see where I am. I look at my piano, listen to a little fountain in the other room, so I'm awake and I'm laying face up. All right, from behind me, 25 feet behind me, is the front door. Now, this, swear to God, okay, this blue, white, tall, skinny, 6'5" roughly,
Very
entity
specific. 6'5".
came through the front door carrying this whole field of blue white light with it. In about a second and a half to 2 seconds, it was walking, but it was floating walking. And it stopped on my right hand side. When it did that, the whole right side of my body went numb, okay, where I couldn't move it. My right eye was already open, but I couldn't close if I wanted. And I'm thinking, I'm going to see old Legley. I'm going to see the family spirit guide I've heard about since I was
Right,
3.
you knew.
So he's like excited and scared.
Yeah.
Like a mix.
But I couldn't even move my left side. But I wasn't in sleep paralysis. I can tell you that for a fact. Big
Okay.
difference.
I was just going to ask. You read my mind.
Yep.
Being in the paranormal world, you read my mind.
So but then I thought, but no, dude, you can't move. So the logical side of me is saying, hey, buddy, you have no power about what you're going to do anyway. So this entity bent down to my right side and whispered in my ear, and this is important. This is not telepathy. This was auditory.
Not this time, anyway.
Like it was audible.
Audible said, "Hi, Steve," in kind of a whisper, but it was somewhere between a male and a female voice. I wasn't sure. And I was trying to see its face, I got the idea, and I could pretty much tell what it looked like, but I couldn't see it full on. I couldn't have a conversation. And then after about 5 seconds, it basically unbent and basically went back out the front door. And I can tell people that there was no UFO parked in our driveway. We had 2 big trucks. So it wasn't a UFO.
No parking spot available.
And they didn't. It says the front door didn't open and close. We think like a portal thing opened there and flooded the room with light from the other side.
But the important thing is that wasn't in the documentary. Is 6 hours later, it was 11:30 in the morning, and my dad and I wanted to get some lunch. So I pulled the coins out of my pocket, my right-hand side pocket, and put them on the table. And these are all standard American coins, and every one of them was magnetized. Okay, it's impossible. You can't magnetize non-magnetic material.
Again, I was like, that's not the metal isn't.
Nope.
You can't do that.
That's why. Otherwise, you would never be able to get on an airplane.
They purposely design coins so they can't be magnetized. So because they have to go into vending machines, and
they'd stick to everything on the way down.
So my dad could pick them up by the face. I could pick them up by the edge. There are a couple of nails in there, 6-penny nails. Of course, those are magnetic, so we could pick up the coins by the nails by the coins. And so that was left out of the documentary. And then the final night was something I have absolutely no memory of. This is what my dad experienced. We had separate bedrooms, of course, separated by a hallway, and both our doors were open. And he was awakened in the middle of the night by this wall of blue-white light that was encompassing my doorway. And my dad, being an ex-cop from Great Britain, like the Monty Python, "What's all this then?" type of stuff.
Right.
So he
I
decided,
got a visual.
yeah, he said, he said, basically he wanted to find out what was going on himself, right?
Yeah.
So he was getting out of bed, how the story goes, and this voice, this time inside of his head, said, Jeffrey, just go back to sleep. Nothing to see here. Everything's okay. And that's what he did. He did what the voice told him to do, went back to sleep. And I have no memory of that.
Yeah.
I have no idea what they were doing to me, what was being done to me. I have absolutely zero memory of that.
Yeah, and we've tried to break through this blackout blocks with Stephen with hypnosis, but we have yet to succeed. It's such a traumatic experience. Like remember Betty and Barney Hill, right?
Yeah, I did an episode on them. In fact, I think I have a duplicate of Betty's dress somehow accidentally in my vintage shopping. It looks exactly the same.
Oh, that's vintage.
Yeah, for sure. It has a little needle hole in it where they stuck it through to get the
it has a brooch in the front. I've never taken a look behind it. I gotta go find it.
When she finally was regressed, she started screaming.
Yes. Oh my gosh, it was so alarming to listen to her. Oh,
yeah. And we just haven't been able to break through the block in Steve's case yet. We're
with knowing that you've seen these creatures in your history. Have you ever tried to have them drawn or have a sketch made or of your specifics, or does that exist somewhere?
I don't think he ever made a sketch, but Philip saw the old Glegley
drawing,
family spirit guide. He saw it as a typical tall gray, you see in
when he was 16 at the house that we were building in 1982. Mm-hmm.
And when Stephen, to unpack some of the things he was just telling you, when he saw the shimmery kind of figure, in our experience, when people are abducted, they'll remember sometimes little bits and pieces of their abduction. But when it comes to the face of their abductors, they frequently don't remember it or can't remember it. It's like there sometimes is a shimmery quality to memory,
right?
And or they'll remember it as
a mental edit.
Owls or
a typical one,
or other, Stephen, when they were boys, they saw them as gnomes, garden gnomes.
Yeah, both my brother and I.
His mother saw them as Chinese people in Chinese regalia.
Well, she also saw.
Interesting.
Yeah. So my point is that this shimmery quality to memory, I believe, is signs of memory tampering.
Right.
Because I believe they do.
Someone scrambled that part.
And especially the face of their abductors. That's the main memory they try and squelch. And so when Stephen saw this shimmery object, I think he was looking straight at an alien at the time, but later they tampered with his memory and he couldn't.
Modified.
Shimmery vagueness.
It bent down to like your right ear would be. It bent down to me from 6.5 feet tall, bent down and whispered. So I was able to see part of it.
I was talking about the previous night.
Okay, right. Okay.
Yeah. So, when we started reaching after
a lot of experiences to kind of organize.
So at about 30 years old, he starts his research.
Right.
But I was 45 when I saw my first UFO, and at that point we started researching a little bit more vigorously. Especially like journalists. That's what we're good at is research, right? So. We began doing research in earnest, but it still took us about 20 years to write the book, to get around to collating everything together.
It's a lot. I mean, even just the examples of everything, it's a lot. Even if you were just taking a small piece to put it all together, I could see why it took quite some time.
A lot of the stuff came from me too, from the standpoint of I was doing my research in the early 90s when there was not the internet to really use, and there
just to use books.
Cell phones. I actually had to do the actual reading, of books.
Or microfilm. Oh, how I miss microfilm. I love it. I don't know why. That was my favorite thing of going to all the libraries to look through newspapers and things like that. But
Papers, yeah.
I'm an old spirit. I might be 41 in body, but nope, I'm an old lady somewhere in there. Old spirit.
We recently did a podcast maybe 6 months ago with two guys that live up in Sonora, California, where we were building our house. Okay,
Yeah, I remember.
and these guys, the older guy had been doing the type of like microfiche and microfilms type stuff, but he'd been going through all the newspapers for decades. And it turns out that Sonora, California is like the third or the fourth most visited by UFOs in the whole country.
It's a hot spot.
It's a
yeah.
real
In the hot spots.
It's a real hot spot.
Exactly. And ironically, where we lived, pretty close to Joshua Tree, is another pretty good hot spot.
I did because one of the episodes I kind of did towards the end of last year was the USA. I think it was top 10 just UFO hotspots, but the one I chose from California was from a different kind of level in the list because I wanted to do one where they're underwater. I can never remember what that is. Please remind me.
Oh yeah, Catalina Island and
Malibu.
Malibu too.
Like you can see it from Google Earth, and it was wild. And that was where I was like, man, there's a lot in California.
Yep.
Now, speaking of the locations, because that was because that mentions one of the places in the chapter 3, where are they hiding? Because you started talking about a bunch of locations. As soon as you mentioned the underground bases, I thought of that episode that I just talked about, and especially the one that's in Pine Bush, New York. And in the 80s and 90s, crafts were seen coming out of the ground, and the people that live there could hear machinery under like earth, which is very crazy to me. And they could see them exiting and entering the ground. And in there, they talk about a joint military alien human type of base that exists.
Right.
And you mentioned that too a couple times.
Yeah.
Don't you think that this alien race that is in these like hot spots where they talk about, do you think they're benevolent or malevolent?
They're self-serving. And so sometimes our best interests align with each other, and it seems like they're doing good things, and sometimes they don't align with each other, and it seems like bad things, but they're serving themselves, we believe.
I call them opportunists, but again, we have to preface this from the standpoint we do not actually call them aliens.
Yeah, we call them cousins because of our theory.
The way they're behaving and their actions is that they are about 12,850 years ahead of us, but they are a branch of humanity. They are Homo sapiens sapien, maybe more. They're more developed Homo sapiens sapien.
They're actually slightly mutated from us, but we have that we have that evidence from this the hair of the alien.
Yeah, that was one of our questions.
Yeah, that was one of your questions too.
I was like, "Oh, we're skimping ahead." That's great.
Sorry. This guy in Australia, he awoke to 2 women in his bed, and he was paralyzed. He couldn't move. And one of the women he described as very much like a hybrid alien person. Her eyes were way too large, and her features were pointy. And she had this long white hair, and the
which
next morning,
I think would be terrifying.
Yeah, he was frightened, but then they had sex with him, and he woke the next morning to find this hairs in his bed, and he got them analyzed, and these hairs are clear, perfectly clear, like fishing line, and that there is no known human type of hair that is perfectly clear, and so. But when they tested it genetically, it tests out as human, except weird mix of DNA, like Gaelic and Basque and Chinese, or this bizarre mixture of DNA. Yeah. What this proves, though, is that they are human, but they are mutants. They have mutated from us a little bit, and we think it's from living underground for thousands of years.
This was real quick. This is exactly what popped into my head when you mentioned that they're clear. Ghost Dog says it's like a polar bear hair, like fur, where they're, that's how they maintain their temperature where they are in the globe. And that was exactly what I thought of. Was that
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
polar bear,
Yeah,
where
the,
they look white, but they're
yeah,
not.
exactly. Even the things, even like with Bigfoot and with the polar bears, the further north you go, you'll find too, even with the Bigfoot, that the further north you go, the larger they get. That's because there's actually a scientific equation that the larger body mass you have, the more heat retention you have.
Right.
So it's beneficial for you to be 10 feet tall versus 6 feet tall the further north you get, whether you're a polar bear or a Bigfoot.
But
And
the polar bear's white, as you say, and I think it's because they don't have enough sun to require melanin.
But the fur itself is clear, which is crazy.
Yeah.
It's wild.
So
But yeah, like that's what they.
So there's the hair of the alien proof, evidence, and then there's also the fact that they're breeding with us. A lot of people think the breeding program, maybe they're genetically modifying, eggs and somehow doing this magic genetically where they're making this hybrid race. But in point of fact, they're just having sex.
Yeah, you think it's just
getting pregnant?
Pleasure, right? Pleasure purposes and to
the most dissatisfying menage a trois the guys have.
Say. I mean, you would think, not to get too crass, but if he was truly terrified, I would think the anatomy would not work properly. If you're picking me up,
I was hoping that somehow happened, but maybe they have the ability to affect him that way.
I for myself, they've probably taken plenty of my reproductive
DNA.
material.
Yeah.
But I don't remember ever having an experience like that. But if the woman's on top of him,
that we know of,
I'm sure that they have ways of extracting.
Well, sure. I mean, that can happen. I mean, unfortunately, it happens in the human race. Women can do it to men, just like men can do it to women. So somehow it happens.
Yeah, but it's still rape.
It's still right. It is totally, absolutely
permission.
But it still manages to happen, which is you would think that the body would just not work properly. But
what they call it in guys, where you have nocturnal emissions, that can happen. You have a dream or whatever, you think you're having a dream,
and just or stress, whatever. It's amazing what stress can do to us. So who knows what can take place. But speaking of the
most of the sperm that they take from men, we think they take directly from the prostate. That's what the whole anal probe thing is all about.
From the testes, actually,
right?
yeah. Mm-hmm. Seminal fluid is in the prostate. But.
Right, and but with women, they stick a needle straight into their ovaries
and that's where you hear Betty, like the needles, like she was. Oh, I could still hear her voice, and I probably only listened to it a couple times.
Yeah.
And then you have the pregnancies that mysteriously disappear at about
again. I was just gonna say that. You said I'm driving. You knew exactly where I was going, because that's what I was gonna ask about. I've seen random shows or read random books or articles where these women are pregnant, and they're not even necessarily impregnated by a human. They are regular pregnant people, and then the baby, they go in for their ultrasound and the baby's gone. Not like a miscarriage. Like it's as if the woman never even had anything, but they have all the prior ultrasounds to prove that this woman 4 months ago was very pregnant. And now, or there's cases of the women, they know that something happened, they're pregnant, and then the baby disappears.
There's a professor, his name is Professor David M. Jacobs. He's written several books on the abduction phenomenon. He did 10,000 hypnotic regressions in his time period, during his long career. He's an older man now. And we like looking at his data pool because it's a nice big data pool. From his research, it shows that about a little over 10%, almost 11% of abductees in his test group were women that claimed they were taken and they had sex with aliens. Mm-hmm. And then 4 or 5 months later, they're taken again. And that's when the baby is stolen.
Yeah. And the stories of these women seeing visions or seeing their potential child, but next time they see them in a very short period of time, they're adults. Like the baby is,
they'll be able
grown up.
They introduce them to their offspring. Yep. And when they coddle their offspring, women are coming back, and under blacklight, there's actually like a phosphorescent residue that's left, almost like our cousins have mutated to be slightly glowing.
Right.
So, and the glow, it comes from their skin oils and their sweat.
I think I could maybe shine some light on this. We have a good friend that did body harmony for years, and they would get together in groups, and when they did these deep meditations and the different stuff they would do working on people, they would end up with this shimmery like white powder on their bodies. Okay.
Interesting.
And when they got them tested, they're called monoatomic earth elements. And actually, these monoatomic earth elements show up outside of the sarcophagus in the king's chamber.
In the Great Pyramid,
In
yes.
the Great Pyramid, there's this white powder, they're rare, they're monoatomics, and it seems to be something that is generated by a humanoid organism somehow. It's like,
well, humans generate it when they
like
have
chi energy,
profound
yeah.
profound religious experiences, religious experience, and the stuff will rain down out of people's hands sometimes, like yogis and gurus.
Sure.
But we definitely see it all around the sarcophagi in the main chamber of the Great Pyramid, right under the where the sarcophagus where the head goes.
Mm-hmm.
That sarcophagus is directly under the point at the top of the pyramid. So we feel like possibly this sarcophagus was utilized to, I don't know, pump a huge amount of energy into
say like a battery, reverse battery thing.
Yeah, they didn't tell us about, but we think that it might have been a consciousness raising tool of some kind.
That was one of its effects. Yes.
One of its usages. Yes, we think it's
Yeah.
also.
Speaking of that, you mentioned you mentioned Egyptians, Teotihuacan, Incans, Mayan, and all the crazy feats. Speaking of the pyramids that they were able to do, and then in modern day, we're left scratching our noggins trying to reverse engineer how this may have happened. I always wondered kind of how these civilizations that are done these crazy things all of a sudden disappear, like the the Mayans, or it's like they fall off the face of the planet, and then something pops up later, maybe some sort of apocalyptic flood, like you also it's very true, water, fire, whatever. Can you kind of give us what's your insight on how you started putting together these civilizations, cataclysmic events? Is this some sort of existence with what you call cousins, after all this time, or are they another species? What's your thoughts on that?
I'll take this real quick, all right?
Of course, my love.
There's a chapter in there in our book where we basically examine just how frequently these near extinction level events or extinction level events have occurred. Okay, they're not that uncommon. And my formerly being a cave explorer, a wild cave explorer in my early 20s, doing a lot of crazy stuff, I can tell you that being underground, if you're in an earthquake, is a very safe place to be. You don't feel the earthquake, right? So
it's definitely safer down there.
So we found that there were Leslie can talk about the nanodiamonds, but we found other things that you couldn't dispute. We found that there was a genetic bottleneck that happened in the human race around 12,850 years ago, where we were reduced to about a population of 10,000 people.
Which is like, nothing.
with the stories of the Bible and the Mahabharata and these different other texts, ancient texts, that there was foreknowledge of a cataclysm. Okay.
Yeah. These flood myths, that's something I studied in college, was the ancient flood myths. There's a guy named Fraser from the 1800s. He wrote a book. Was it 1700s, 1800s? 1800s, I believe. 1800s. And he wrote a book about 500 separate cultures around the world that had a flood myth in their ancient lore. And since then, there's been a lot more of them discovered. There's 1,200 separate cultures all around our world that have a flood myth in their ancient stories. And we surmised then that the flood probably really did happen. And sure enough, um, about 4 decades ago, nanodiamonds were discovered in 13,000-year-old soil in large concentration. And so we think 13,000 years ago, there was this miniature extinction event where the Clovis people disappeared, the mammoth, the mastodon, the dire wolf, the saber-toothed cat, the American horse, the American camel. Most of the big animals of the plains were all wiped out about the same time
decimated
period.
or like completely wiped out.
And the discovery of the nanodiamonds in the soil of that time period proves that it was a celestial event, impact event of some kind. And because nanodiamonds only form during celestial impact events, where a meteor or a comet or whatever comes into our atmosphere, bringing dust particles with it. And those dust particles superheat and turn into these tiny little round diamonds called nanodiamonds. And so there was a high concentration of them in North America and right at that time period. So
in Europe too.
And since then, at first we thought it was the Hiawatha asteroid crater was discovered in Greenland in 2016. And we thought, oh, this is it. But since then, that one's dated to 48 million years ago. So it's not that one. But since then, the Younger Dryas comet impact area has been discovered in Lake Superior. And it has been dated to the correct time period, to 12,850 years ago.
And somehow they know the size of it. They said it was 62 miles in diameter or 100 kilometers.
And all of these flood myths talk about a warning. They almost all begin with a warning that God came and warned everybody that there was a horrible flood was coming and you better build an ark or you better go underground or go to high ground or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so we surmised that the event really did happen. And somebody 13,000 years ago on this planet had high enough technology, good enough astronomy skills to actually spot this thing coming. And they warned the planet. We think that mankind was more advanced than we give them credit for.
Yes.
Right.
But that impact was so devastating that it kind of scraped a lot of evidence of our technology off the surface of the world. You know, with 1,000-foot high tsunamis, you know, rushing to every at the same time. Yeah. But after that, most of the flood myths end the same too, and the ending is mankind was fading away and dying out. We had devolved into barbarism and cannibalism, and it looked like we weren't going to make it, like we were going to be wiped out. Mm-hmm. When a god came to us, or an emissary of God, or a family of gods, and came to us and re-civilized us, brought us back up out of the muck, you know, and taught us again how to, you know, grow crops and build, you know, do architecture and math and, you know, everything.
Animal husbandry.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that after the cataclysm, before the cataclysm, 13,000 years ago, everyone sees this thing coming, and we think that a lot of them retreated underground into these underground cities, underground bunkers, in order to escape the extinction event. Kind of like that movie Deep Impact, where Morgan Freeman's they're creating an underground bunker where 50,000
to retreat to.
We think that's exactly what happened, you know, is that they saw this thing coming and so some of them went underground, and those didn't lose their technology or their culture or their knowledge, where the rest of us poor schmoes on the surface, we were almost wiped out to a man. And the few survivors were chucked back into the Stone Age and had to start over, essentially. And so we think that what happened was they took pity on us at some point, possibly realizing that they still needed us too. You know what I mean? Because we think they may be becoming less viable living underground. And maybe that is one of the reasons for them stealing DNA from surface dwellers. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, vitamins and sun and oxygen, and it's going to happen.
It possibly be negatively affecting their ability to reproduce their own race,
and
right?
Also, explains their need for cattle blood and cattle sex organs.
Yeah,
You
we
know,
think they took herds under with
Yeah.
them, and those are also becoming non-viable, and that explains cattle mutilation.
necessity.
So we think that some of them came back up to the surface, installed themselves as gods, and basically re-civilized us. And this is where some of these inexplicable um, buildings and megalithic structures are coming from, is that they, with their superior knowledge, came back to the surface, built all this stuff, and then disappeared again, right? And
Right.
so like in
Sacsayhuaman?
yeah, like Sacsayhuaman and Pumapunku and the Peruvian and Bolivian sites, they definitely couldn't have been built by the Inca. The Inca were bronze tool users, and just the road going through the Andes. They actually made a road going through the entire Andes mountain range, and we don't think they were ever capable of building these sites. And there's a lot of that kind of thing with the people who the pyramids are attributed to could not have built the pyramids.
Yeah, they're copper.
Right.
They only had copper tools. They didn't even have bronze tools.
Yeah.
So, there's rose granite lines the main chamber of the Great Pyramid, and granite you can't make a dent in granite with copper
Right.
tools, let alone
a few strikes and it would be destroyed. Like,
yeah. And then, so the Inca, they keep modern archaeology, they keep attributing these sites to the Inca in South America, right? And until finally, one of the big megalithic cities called Karl Supe, a big chunk of rock broke away during an earthquake and exposed this grass netting that was underneath the stones, and that was carbon dated.
Carbon 14.
And it showed that these structures were built 5,000 years ago, and this is thousands of years before the Inca.
Yeah, the Incas
So
up to like 1,000, 1,500 years ago.
it was actually about 500 AD. So it's
1,000 years ago.
Yeah. So, but this is many thousands of years prior to that.
yeah.
So so now we know for a fact that 5,000 years ago there was a pyramid megalithic site building culture in South America that we know nothing about.
Right. We're still
Zero.
trying to. Yeah, and speaking of ancient, it was kind of civilizations or people. Another interesting thing that you brought up was giants, and that was a really like as soon as I thought, and you mentioned there was a quote. I have to look at my quote because it was very interesting.
Okay.
Your quote said, a line, quote, "A race which flourished, lived and died many centuries ago, and those days told of in scripture." And I immediately was like, I don't remember learning about giants in the Bible, but I am not that well read. I'll admit right away. I learned the basic Bible school stuff, and my husband was like, "Yeah, they mentioned and that's what the number one book in the world regarding of what you believe. It's just sold everywhere. It's a hotels, so it's a mass produced." And they talks about giants. So there's another civilization. Another civilization. Do you feel that these giants were just another version of us, like you're mentioning, kind of like cousins, or do you think they were otherworldly?
Just real quick, I want to mention too that if you want to do further reading on that, get the Ethiopian Bible. Okay, that's the unabridged.
Yeah.
It has
that has
like
the Book of Enoch in it.
In there.
You mentioned that. Yeah, there's. I mean, in different religions, there's usually kind of taught you should, maybe you don't read certain versions, but for research, absolutely. It's like the only version I know is the one that they show in the Lutheran Church. So I was like, well, now I want to know about these other versions.
Well,
right.
We can only theorize, of course, but this is what I think it is that, remember we talked about our cousins coming back to the surface?
Mm-hmm.
Enoch talks about them, the watchers that return to man from the skies, right? He said there was 250 of them or something, or I forget, 200 of them.
Yeah.
And they came to Earth and they took wives and started having kids, So if our cousins have slightly mutated from us, and they came back to the surface and started having sex with us and producing progeny. Because they are mutants, they're slightly mutated from us. We think their progeny may have been these obnoxious giants. You know, they're said to be, they're stupid, they're mean, they're cannibalistic. They're, you know, in other words, they're not like.
No, I remember Mr. Creep was telling me that it's like they're not always in great light.
Yeah, they're usually.
There's part of it in our book about the Anunnaki, okay, and the Anunnaki and the Nephilim.
Yeah,
okay.
the giants, Anunnaki are supposed to be giant too, but I really hesitate to be sure on that, because they're always depicted as giants, but so many times, just a person, if they're an important person,
Right,
they'll be made bigger. Like the Egyptians do that, right? They'd have a giant statue of the pharaoh, and his wife would be half size, and his architect would be 1 foot tall, you know, because it's. Yeah. So I can't be sure that they really were giants, but that's another possibility too. Is that there possibly these giants are part Anunnaki and part human, and maybe that's why they're gigantic.
Yeah, Hugh Newman has got a couple really good books out. Yeah. You know, we've met Hugh Newman a couple times.
We can only theorize, though. We can only kind of guess.
These giants can range in size from 8 foot tall to 20 foot tall, depending on what you believe. You know.
Well, I will say though that when I was reading, the main source of data on the giants is newspaper articles from around the 1800s, early 1900s. Somebody may be plowing their field and dig up a giant, and or they dug into some of these mounds and they found giant skeletons in them, and those were all the evidence was just scooped up by the Smithsonian and disappeared somewhere. You know, we think destroyed.
Which is usually what happens when it's something they don't want us to know about.
Yeah. But they only were all of the articles I read. They're only the tallest skeleton was 12 foot. As far as I know,
that's like a recent. I've only recently started diving into that, and I'm sure you learn about giants and folklore and things like that. But I've only recently kind of realized that they're showed up in real texts and books and magazines and newspapers in fair recent history. So.
There's a rare book out there from like an island that's near the Solomon Islands. This guy we were talking to not long ago, where they just about a couple hundred years ago, they literally had giants that were still living on this island, and they actually had to end up killing, I think, one of them or something. They had a battle. They had like a wrestling match, whatever, and this giant was like 9 foot tall or whatever, hit this guy in the chest and killed him with one shot. And it was very well documented. In fact, it's a rare book. We wrote it down here somewhere. It's a rare book. It's like $500 now to get a hold of this.
Of course. I was like, what's the book name?
It's an account of this tribe of giants that were still around just as of like 100 or 200 years ago. So it was like
that's wild.
I think it's in
the Solomons,
with the Solomon Islands. We'll try and get that information for you. But
because usually even though those books, they're somehow been scanned in over time, and even if you can't get the book, some sort of Cambridge or Yale or whatever, they tend to have it somewhere in their library. So that's interesting.
Yeah, that would be cool.
It really is. Like, we think that as far as like the being spirited away, the skeletons of the giants in Europe was probably more to do with the Vatican, because Smithsonian wouldn't have that far of a reach. But there's have been a disinformation and a squelching of old knowledge, and I think it's because we really are in this type of a relationship with our cousins, where they don't really want us to know on the surface that who's really in charge of the planet or underneath our feet and have been here for a long time.
Well, and Look at everything we don't understand as a human race. We destroy, we kill. We found the only ginormous guppy fish in the middle of the ocean. What do? We kill it.
First thing.
Like, first thing. They show it on a hook and there's a picture next to it. Biggest octopus ever found in the world. What do? We kill it. So I kind of don't blame them for like, we don't exist. We're not here.
What would we do if we found a Bigfoot? We would kill it and dissect it.
Yeah,
eventually.
Yeah, like I don't blame him for running. Absolutely.
If we believe Admiral Byrd's, and we do,
we do.
If we believe Admiral Byrd's diary, where he met with the Ariani, which are our cousins, that the branch that lives under the ice sheet in Antarctica, if we believe that he met with them, one of the things they said to us was that we try not to, you welcome to the underworld,
of the
Ariani. We try not to have anything to do with you surface people and your barbaric wars. So they think of us as barbarians,
I mean, we are kind of.
But because you've learned to crack the atom, now we have to make an exception. We don't think you should have this power. This power is beyond your ability to control it.
Because we destroy.
And I would have thought, at the time I read this, I would have thought it was a nice little myth, maybe, except for the fact that the UFOs are incredibly worried about our nukes. Mm-hmm. From day one, they started parking UFOs outside our nuclear research facilities, outside our nuclear bases, outside our nuclear launch silo bases, and any military installations that had nuclear weapons,
or aircraft carriers or nuclear subs,
and they're following our military. And I didn't know how often they were following our military until I saw in 2023, the congressional hearing with the two pilots and the David Grush, the whistleblower guy.
Mm-hmm. Graver and Graves.
One of the pilots, Graves, said that Ryan Graves said, we are seeing these UFOs every single time we go out on maneuvers. They're following us every single time we go out on maneuvers. And so that's when I realized that they're monitoring our nuclear weapons all around the world all the time.
And a lot of these sightings go back to 2004, way before there was any advanced drone technology.
Yeah.
Okay, so that the Chinese are reporting the same thing, the Russians are, the Japanese, the British are reporting the same things, the same type of interactions. So
any of the superpowers are being followed. Yeah.
It's not just us, even the Australians. All right.
Yeah. It's interesting because you say aircraft, naval aircraft carriers, they're nuclear powered, but we don't. Well, I said that was my job. I was a nuke in the Navy, and I was like, there's no nuclear weapons on a carrier, so I wonder why they would be following a carrier. There's weaponry, of course, absolutely.
Nuclear subs sometimes.
But the subs, absolutely. We got all kinds of fun toys on those. That's what they're there for. But but for nuclear power, it's just propulsion. That's all they're using it for. But it's got a heck of a, You're
not just bristling with nuclear weapons, huh?
No.
So I'm curious. It's like, are they tracking that there's reactors? Or if are they tracking because they want the weaponry? Because
I think they're tracking the weaponry. Because they also have the Nimitz incident also included a lot of USO activity, underwater activity as well.
That's the acronym I couldn't remember earlier. Thank you. The one off of California.
Yeah,
my brain is scrambled.
I was the CB in the Navy from 80 to 86. So I was air det mostly when we went places. I actually did a tour on Midway. I was lucky that way in 1981. So that was fun.
I saw that you were in the Navy and I was like, okay, I like him. Yep. My grandpa was in, my uncle was in.
Yeah. Everybody in my bloodline on both sides, apart from my younger brother, did military duty, whether it was the RAF, whether it was my uncle on my dad's side did American Army. And it's funny, he had a PhD in engineering by the time he was 21, because
got a brain.
they had the program where they had this basically a 7-year program in England post World War II, or you start out like as an apprentice and you go through this where you have to learn how to build everything from scratch. And by the time you finish those 7 years, you have you have a PhD. And so
Yeah.
when he came over to the United States when he was 21 with a PhD, he had no
You're like,
problem.
pick any job you want.
Yeah, he's a fantastic draftsman and an engineer. Yeah, but it was like we don't have lack of intelligence in our bloodline. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Right.
So,
I
We
think
do
that
think that, Stephen and I both did a lot of Kundalini raising work and chanting work and, chakra vibrating work in our lives. And as we were doing those practices, we discovered more and more that we were becoming more telepathic.
right.
And it made me realize that telepathy is actually a human birthright that has atrophied in us,
Right.
but not atrophied in our cousins. We think that, you see, it actually takes work to keep the consciousness open enough to have telepathy. And so we think in their culture and the way they raise their children that this is a regular practice. That's why they're capable of communicating with everybody telepathically.
Right.
Sure.
And we think even though they are physically human, just the fact that they can read minds, they can read each other's minds, I think would make them quite different than us in so
Mhm.
many ways.
Right.
Their society, their culture would be just night and day from us.
Look what we're doing with DNA right now. Now we're getting closer and closer to like almost like a Minority Report, where we can almost like
That's a scary
almost
movie.
who's going
Yeah.
to do murder, or let's
Mhm.
say somebody's just done 3 rapes, and now we have the ability to be able to process the semen sample so quickly that we know who the person is. They're doing it on cases that are 15, 60 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're finding out. It's just like
They're clearing their cold case shelves now.
Yeah.
with
Well, now
DNA.
everybody's giving their DNA to find out who their great 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 grandpa was, and they're just
But
sending it in.
if everybody can read minds, you're gonna start weeding out people that are really just evil because it's of no benefit to your society.
Yeah, they would be sort of anybody who was an antisocial personality would kind of be shunned in that kind of a society, I would think, and
Yeah.
it would slowly weed that element out of their population. And so we think they're enormously different than us, but physically not that different from us.
I think it was we've done like what is it, about 2,000 nuclear detonations between all the countries since 1945.
Many underground.
A
Yeah.
lot.
So it's like
A lot.
it's definitely attracting the attention of somebody.
Yeah, I think they
Sure.
got their notice.
At this point, it's like a bug lamp to anybody who's sensitive to it. All these these
I
beings.
think we look at it like it was kind of like a scramble to to get your jet fighters like out of mothballs and figure out what to do when they realize that, oh my God, these people.
Oh my God, they have nukes now.
They have
Yeah.
nukes now. So we're not violent people, but we're going to have to deal with these violent people there's a lot more of them than us, and they're screwing up the planet.
They
We
have
better start studying them now.
Think of the problem they have. They have, like, I said it the other day on a podcast. I said they have 8 billion obnoxious boobs up on their ceiling.
Yes.
Barbaric, obnoxious.
Yeah.
Self-serving, greedy.
All the bad qualities.
Yeah.
That's the humans.
And there's 8 billion of them up there.
We have a question in the audience, and it actually came up a little while ago, but we were talking about other things at the time. So Jess says, I'd love to know their opinions on star seeds, saying that she did research after watching the interview with What Goes Bump, and that she's just curious. Is that something you'd like to shed the light on? I don't want to miss that question.
Go ahead, Steve.
Star seeds?
The star children.
Oh, star children. Oh, okay.
I think that's what you mean, right? The star children.
I'm not sure. She didn't elaborate further. Maybe she'll leave a comment here in a second.
We've seen definite evidence of a increased evolution of the human genome.
Yeah.
Especially like as an example, I use an example of an 18-month-old boy, a white boy that was sitting at a piano. and I'm a pianist myself, so I really appreciated this. And he's just like playing without the music. He's playing a simplified version of Clair de Lune by Debussy on the piano, and there are multiple um, examples of these, star children or star seeds having telepathic or even telekinetic abilities. Definitely musically, definitely enhanced ability with language, early ability with language. So yes,
We
and
think
also increased eye size too.
yeah, we think about the DNA was tested of the human race from 3,000 years ago, and in just 3,000 years, our genetic genome has changed 7%. This is a huge change in such a small time period.
In 3,000 years.
We think they're changing us. We think that they're trying to civilize us and slowly trying to, get us to be more, take better care of the planet and, be less greedy and be less.
They're having a hell of a time.
Yeah, they're trying,
Yeah.
And I think that's evidence of their tampering with us. They're trying to civilize us, and I think it may be working a little bit. When I read the Hunchback of Notre Dame, right? This is just a couple hundred years ago, right? And the people of that time period used to go down to the town square to see the people being tortured.
Oh, beheadings.
Yeah. We've got a hanging today. So this bloodthirstiness, it's not entertainment so much anymore. You know what I mean? It's like, I think we're getting a little less bloodthirsty, hopefully.
Well, now we do it in movies, though. We see horrific stuff in movies. It's like, we're getting, we're kind of desensitized in certain ways, but we're
very much so. Yeah.
Really being desensitized. That's the way I'm seeing it. But even in America, just a couple hundred years ago at the most, maybe 150, it was okay. It would be the Sunday hanging. We're gonna ones get hanged.
They'd pack a picnic lunch, and go down and watch them torture people.
Well, and then it swung in the 50s. I'll say there's way more decades, but I'll just use that one as an example. I mean, you couldn't say damn or it was anything was scandalous in movies, Alfred Hitchcock. Oh my God. It was just horrific. And now we've swung the other way. And actually someone that's in our audience right now, he just got here. He was on our podcast before, Helvington Hellmaster. He runs on horror movies and does reviews and things like that. And not to call him out, but some of the things that he shares, I don't know how those movies even make it into, so people can see them. They're horrific. I just don't care.
The horror movie has gotten a lot more graphic. It used to be more of a psychological horror.
We're completely desensitized. It's like back in the day. Let's watch someone get their head chopped off. Yay! I'll bring a pie. I'm like,
what? It's gotten so much worse than that. Even that, taking people's eyeballs out and eating them. All that kind of stuff.
Ew.
Horrible stuff.
Yes, ew.
I mean, Alone, the show Alone, which we both like. You see these people just take out animals and then they have to chop them up, and you see that in movies too.
And
you
eat
see
every
humans,
particle.
even that what was it that series we watched called Dexter?
But I love that. Love his job, and I love the meticulous nature. But yes,
yeah.
I mean,
the blood guy.
that really helped us to desensitize a lot right there. That character.
Yeah. And what's crazy is that show is they really don't it's compared to what the movies are. I
know it's tame in some ways.
Oh, I can't watch that kind of stuff. Although alien movies scare me, so
to be honest.
Well, I don't see any more additional questions from our comments. We've had a lot of comments tonight. So thank you Thank you so much, guys, for everyone. I'm kind of just going back through to make sure I didn't miss anything. So I told them they could ask questions. So far, we've had lots of really good comments. So I think that was one of our last questions. Do you have any other little tidbits that you wanted to make sure that you brought up before we kind of wrap things up?
Well, we talked a lot about what we thought happened about 13,000 years ago. And that's like the first half of our book.
Right.
The second half of our book is looking more at the Anunnaki question and looking at events from 300,000 years ago when we believe that the human race was uplifted.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually some signs of this. And, the Anunnaki have their stories about how they, the ancient Sumerian tablets talk about how they needed, there were aliens that came here from another planet.
I'm just
And
going to
they
show the chapters
need
to everybody while you
gold in
talk.
mass quantities. And they wanted a worker race. And supposedly they took Homo erectus and uplifted us into Homo sapien. And then slowly over the next 50,000 years, continued to improve the model into Homo sapiens sapien. And I would have thought, oh, what a lovely little myth this is. What a great little story, except that there happens to be some genetic proof of it, in our genetic genome.
It's in the neocortex.
Yeah, in the
neocortex around Broca's brain. Jason Martell talks about this. I actually went to a lecture on this, and they actually can show it's like a cut and paste CRISPR job that was done around the neocortex area of Broca's brain. Broca's brain, famous book that Carl Sagan wrote in the 70s and early 80s.
Which happens to be about the same time period where we were evolving from, 300,000 years ago. So we're talking, which is about the same time period that this part of the brain was, evolving.
Right.
And Ghost Dog says that series was my idea. He'll have all kinds of ideas, and then sure enough, it'll pop up on TV. So I had to share that.
Cool.
So we think that this uplifting really did take place, and because of this CRISPR thing, and about the same time period is when the two possible progenitors for Bigfoot were alive on the planet. Homo erectus robustus, right?
Australopithecus robustus.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. Australopithecus robustus, and what was the other one? Gigantopithecus, right. These two, we think that these are possibly, they took those and created Bigfoots. I think they were trying to create a worker race.
Mm-hmm.
Bigfoots would be an incredibly good worker. You know what I mean? The strength of
strong,
them.
Yeah.
They created both of us at that time period, and we think that they utilized Bigfoots as sentries, guarding the entrances to their underground cities.
Yeah, we want to wrap this up though. We want to talk about also about let people know about our TV show.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay. Well, we'll get to that then. So again, the book is Who They Are and What They're Up To. Anyone who reads it, Hiawatha, change Younger Dryas for Hiawatha.
Right.
And then we have a documentary out called Who They Are. It's on YouTube. And we have our own show now called Abductions 101, UFOs and the Paranormal Connection. Because of our theories, we think we see a lot of crossover between the cryptid phenomenon, the Bigfoots and the dog boys and the moth boys. We think our cousins have no qualms about using genetic manipulation to create hybrids we think, like when we want to do a bunch of underwater work, we put scuba gear on our people, right? And when they want to do a bunch of underwater work, they breed a bunch of underwater breathing creatures.
Right.
These workers, these genetically engineered workers.
We know that there's a huge underground ocean subsurface. I forget how many miles down it is, but it's about as big as our oceans on the surface. So obviously, either we came across the Greys that may even be more of an ancient civilization than we are, or we genetically tampered and made them, part human, but also part synthetic. So
that's our theory, because we think the Greys, the small Greys, they tend to behave like robots. They don't really behave like living creatures, like normal living creatures.
Right.
They tend to, they never question anything. They always know what they're doing next. They never stand around going, "Oh, what should we do next?" or anything like that.
Right.
And they're completely emotionless. Everyone says, even when they're terrifying their victims, they show no emotion to it.
Yeah. Sociopathic in nature, like does
we
not
think
bother them.
They're very Vulcan.
we think the Nordics are kind of the ones in charge. The Nordics aliens look just like we do.
Tall Swedes.
Because we think they are, right? They are us, right? And that's why they're taking so many Caucasians. Like 90% of abductees are Caucasian. And that made no sense if they're coming here from distant star systems, right? Why would they care about one race versus another race? But if they happen to be a branch of the Caucasian race, like we think they are, then of course they would have all kinds of uses for Caucasian.
It makes sense, though. It totally does. And you see a lot of cryptids, like Mothman, Flatwoods Monster, Bigfoot. They often cross talk about, are these aliens, especially the Flatwoods Monster, because they think that was an alien ship that crashed just because of what they say because of the dress. So it happens in so many conversations they talk about, and it makes sense what you just said, like the cross between the two.
Yeah, they're always bipedal too.
All the aliens are bipedal hominids,
right?
Standing
with the same
almost
structure. Way.
Right.
Even some of the weirdest ones, even like
mantis.
One of the people we're in contact with was having sex with. He called her. What did he call her? A insectoid queen. And he has children by her.
He has some videos though. I would like to see that.
Anyway, but he
for science sake, right?
Yeah, and had sex with her and had babies, But
in the modern day.
I asked him, does she have the same skeletal structure as we do? And the answer is yes. So we're still talking about perfectly upright walking bipedal hominids.
But the head is different. That's how he knows.
Yeah, they have. He showed me. I sent him a ton of pictures saying, which one is it? You know what I mean?
It's like a lineup of candidates.
Yeah, it has like a crest, the back of its head, and the mouth is a little bit almost like mandible like, and
very Babylon 5-ish.
Yeah,
I don't know if you guys watch that show, but
and the crowd of universe goes to.
That's crazy. I mean, I guess if it's still happening in today's world, I'm sure it is. Lots of people just probably don't want to admit to it.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And so if you people want to reach out to us and talk to us or ask any questions, feel free to reach out on our Instagram page. It's at leslie.shaw.author. And DM us if you have any questions. We'd be happy.
And I have tagged all of your website and of course your Instagram. It's all in the description below. So, and whoever's watching this will come off of our live page, but this video is going to be going into our kind of catalog of videos that you can watch at any time. That's not just a live video. Now, who they are and what they're up to is available on ebook and paperback book. You can go to whotheyarebook.com. Correct? Did I say that right? Okay.
Yeah. So you go to Amazon to buy the book.
Or Amazon and to buy it. You learn about the book on their website. You can check out their blog, their projects, and pick up a copy of their book if you are a like-minded creep, because it's in the Creepy Confidential library now. It will be going right over there.
We've started having a merch page too. I was an artist before I was a journalist. So I did a lot of the designing myself, and Steve did a little bit too. But
very cool.
We have shirts. This is one of our shirts for our show.
I love that. I love that we wore our own merch real quick, because I have mine on.
It's like a uniform, right?
Yeah. I was like, you gotta rep your own, your own designs and your own brand, and of course, we just had I spoke about the Hellmaster, the gentleman that runs a channel here on YouTube, and he says just followed, so he has just followed you guys over at Hellzone TV. He was part of the finale for last year, so you would, if you want to see who that is. Really cool people over there.
We'll follow that.
Says, I'll definitely be watching the replay. So those are some of our last comments.
That's
So thank you again so much for joining our kickoff for 2025. We've been talking about this for a while, and then January finally rolled around. So it was a lot of fun to have you on. And if you can just hang out for a couple minutes, I'm going to just sign out on here and talk to everybody for just a second. But don't leave real quick.
Okay.
All right. Say goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
All right, everybody. So I hope you enjoyed the show. This video, of course, will be going into our catalog. You can go to creepyconfidential.com if you want a shirt. We have all kinds of designs, including a what would have been episode art that is now on all kinds of cool things. Our Heaven's Gate art is also on there. Classic logo. We got the 3D logo, all the merch designs. You can go back and watch all of the live streams there as well. We have lots of episodes coming, which I cannot wait. Went from kind of busy to busy, and I cannot wait to bring you all kinds of creepy content. So until next time, I cannot wait. Until next time, we'll see you next time here on Creepy Confidential.